Hello, welcome back to IT Management. We're going to keep continuing on our project management side of this, and this is the second part of maybe 3 or 4 of why all the videos Agile is dead and Scrum's this, that, and the other. So what I want to try to do is deconstruct some of this and stop some of the gaslighting around how bad Agile is and how bad Scrum Masters are. So the best way for me to do this is I want to give you a real case study. A lot of times when I talk about things that have happened to me, people think it's digression, but what I'm trying to do is give you real world case studies so you can actually put context into this. A lot of times you'll take a training class and the example is so abstract and it doesn't pertain. You can't put it in any real context. So this Agile is dead cottage industry that's coming up. That's what we're going to deconstruct with a case study of precisely why we have Agile frameworks, methodology, whatever you want to call it, in the first place. And so my case study is going to be the first time I ever used it was after I had finished a project on waterfall. This is a fairly complex ERP integration, and what we were doing, it was an aerospace service shop. And they had an old piece of software. This was probably written in the late 80s, I guess. And there were a lot of these going around, made to manage Macola, that really did a good job of allowing people to automate a lot of their processes without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in custom development. But they were a little too rigid in some areas and a little too freeform in some areas. I always laugh about that. There was one that had so many fields that were varchar max. And they should have been float fields, meaning it should have never been anything but a 1 in there or 1.1. Instead, 99% of the entries in there in the rows were 99.57, 28.28. And then there would be 1% were pricing structure A or batch B. And those are tough because it makes it incredibly difficult to do data analytics on that later on. So we didn't want to do the back end or the financial office accounting stuff. So we got them on Microsoft Dynamics, and then we were going to write our floor management software from BOM, bill of materials, the router that moves the product through the process, scheduling. There was shipping, logistics, a lot going on here. But it was a waterfall approach. We did all the requirement gatherings. This is the software development life cycle under waterfall. We create this big project plan in Microsoft Project and start to work. And about 2 months into it, the actual coding of it, there was a little piece of the project, and we put a fairly new guy on it. Guy maybe had a year's worth of experience. He was a math major in college, smart guy, good developer for only a year. But we don't want to give him too big a piece of pie that early in the career. And the scheduling thing was, I said, well, we have 25 machines, and we have this list of people, and if they're certified on that machine, we can schedule them on that. And we just don't want to we want to make sure we don't schedule 2 people on the same machine for 2 different projects at the same time. Easy enough. That's not exactly the container shipping problem. It's not real difficult. So we're working on that, and the guy works on it for about a week, and then after about another week, we do some testing on it. Okay, this is going, everything else is going along fine. Bring the customer in. Now, a lot of younger folks that do Agile now think that the customer was only brought in at the end. I've never seen that. Even in the waterfall, you would bring the customer in from time to time, give them some progress, show them things. And there's a great book called Joel on Software about when you do that, leave it black and white wireframes, because if customers can't articulate what's wrong, they might just not like the look of it. He says, okay, well, let us work on this, and then you get your fonts all squared away, put a little color into it. And customer comes back in, oh, it looks great now. And all you did was an hour's worth of work. So this one, that wasn't the case. We brought the customer in and said, okay, here's what we have now. We're moving forward. The bill of materials is pretty straightforward, looks good. He sits down with the guy that did the scheduling, and the customer kind of scratches his head and says, yeah, we realized we can't really schedule this until this piece is in for a lot of our projects, which we don't have control over. So we need some way to go out to the customer site and say, make sure this product that they manufactured for us is in so that we can put them together. Okay, another little thing. Well, of course, it's a scheduling piece. It grew exponentially. Also, we have to make sure that in the routing internally here, that this piece has been through quality control. It went on and on and on. About 6 weeks later, we'd made no progress on this project at all. After that, I learned a valuable lesson. So the next one we did, which was a very similar project, we adopted a more agile approach. I'd done some reading on it for a couple months. This is 15 years ago. 14. This looks good. So we implemented that. It was much more successful because when we got locked up on something, we knew we were only locked into a 2 or 3 week sprint. And then we could put that back in the product backlog and say, we need to reevaluate this, better define the scope. Now, a lot of people that are slamming Agile right now are slamming because a lot of companies still have a project manager. And they say, oh, that's really the role of product owner. But the project manager had budgetary issues with this. And so there are going to be projects. We still have a project manager. I don't see the big sin in that. It's maybe a bigger look at it. The notion is the Scrum Master and the product owner work together and with the Scrum team, the developers, and they are the project managers. That sounds good. There's some validity to that, but it doesn't always work that well. And in my first case study there, you see why everything locked up, because we didn't have any of this. So that's the first step. Agile is not dying or dead because it's here for a real precise reason. So, and I hope that context helps you understand that it is for us, and I know a lot of Agile people I've talked to, Lean Scrum Masters, that have been doing this for 15, 20 years, say the same thing. The reason they went to that in the first place was scope creep. So, again, my first Is Agile Dead video, I said, well, this is why it's not. And I mentioned this guy was complaining on Scrum Masters, and how bad they were. And so, is the Scrum position dead? Is the Scrum Master position dead? So is the Scrum Master the problem? That's the other, not as many, but I'm seeing videos on that too, that one in particular is the Scrum Master is a problem. And what's happening there is people are taking very little pieces of anecdotal evidence that they've seen with an overbearing Scrum Master, or a Scrum Master doesn't know what they're doing. And again, it's not realistic. It's not a rational argument against the Scrum Master. I'll give you one example. I was working on a web marketing project, and the Scrum Master was also the project manager. And that's not what it's supposed to be. But in the real world, things don't always go to plan, and these things happen. It's budgetary constraint. And the Scrum Master was managing the developers down to 4-hour blocks. So that's not really a Scrum Master. But so let's look at what a Scrum Master really does and why it's so important. I just got Scrum Master certified a week or two ago, and I had done that kind of role for years. And what it's about doing is why this developer who makes $140,000 a year or a software engineer that maybe making $300,000 a year is busy going to the marketing person and asking them how they want something done. It's a huge waste of time. I'm going to give you another contextual example again. This is a true case study. Very large financial firm. We were doing a project for them, and they had implemented Agile, but didn't have Scrum Masters yet. They were just trying to get the Agile team. They were doing it right, slowly getting into it, and the team was supposed to be self-organizing. And the meetings, the quick Scrum meetings, is 15 minutes a morning is all you're supposed to do. What would happen is, right in the middle of a meeting, 7 or 8 developers, that doesn't mean coders, it's just developing the product. Right in the middle of it, there was a problem, and 7, 8 minutes in, 2 or 3 people, somebody said, I have a problem working on this. This data is coming from this part of the world. It's an international thing. And so 2 of the other guys said, I've seen this before, what we could do. And it turned into a meeting that lasted an hour or two. And the project manager we had on this said, this is happening 2 or 3 times a week. So bringing in a Scrum Master allowed that to stay at 15 minutes. And in the middle of it, the Scrum Master's the master of the process, the master of the Scrum, not the people. And they got good ones, and they would say, okay, well, this is great. I'm so happy we found this. Can we move this to a side discussion, wrap up our Scrum, and you guys can get to work on this? Because what they always had happen was 3 or 4 or 5 people that weren't involved in it, stuck in an hour meeting that didn't feel like they could leave. So the Scrum Master is, and this is why I also got the certification. I'm transitioning jobs right now over the next couple months, maybe not, probably, but I got some real interest in a company in California, San Francisco, that's wanted me as a Scrum Master. I said, I'm more of a project management. And so this thing paid like, I think the range was like 130 to 160 grand for a Scrum Master, which I thought, man, that's a lot. And they said, well, it's the developers on this make 200 or 300,000. It was exactly what I just explained. That 130, 140 grand, 160 grand a year for a Scrum Master, that was nothing, because they were saving so much money. This Scrum Master would make them a fortune if they were somewhat efficient by removing these obstacles and taking things off the plate of the developers and software engineers. It was the right thing to do. So it's not just the process that people get stuck into as Scrum Masters. I get all that. Everybody has to keep reevaluating themselves and retraining themselves and watching that they stay in their swim lanes there, or they stay in their lanes. So to say that that's the Scrum Master is a problem is patently ridiculous. That's the one job in the whole thing. Ahead of the product owner, the developers, you can say it's always profitable. That's always a cash flow center. That guy can save you a fortune on doing things for people that are huge productivity hits. And another one I think is a lot of these project managers, if you've never done development, it's kind of difficult to be a project manager or a Scrum Master and really get what's going on. A good developer sometimes will sit there staring at his screen or doing the rubber duck thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, where they're just trying to figure out how to solve this specific problem. And if you interrupt them every half hour, and I see this on the daily, this is something that's getting better too. You interrupt them 2-3 times a day. I was a big problem. I used to do this to my developers. I only bugged you for 10 minutes. I only bugged you for 2 minutes. And they would say, and I had been a full stack developer, and it just, you forget stuff. So but that 2 minutes you took out of my time took me out of a train of thought I'd been on for 2 hours. And I'm not going to be able to get right back into that. You cost me a half hour of time to get back on track. And I had it once to a guy, and he said, I was so close, and you probably sent me back 4 hours. I felt terrible. He had been trying to work through this problem, and so that's the kind of stuff the Scrum Master should have been taking care of. Don't interrupt the developer right now. Let's get this tomorrow morning at the Scrum meeting. So this one, to suggest that the Scrum Masters aren't needed, I'm not getting. And I'll tell you this, if you're making your living, not making your living, but if you're doing this part of this cottage industry of slamming Agile and Scrum all the time, there's 2 problems. One, you don't have an alternative. I hate those when I see somebody points out what a big problem this is and how all these corporations are idiots and all the Fortune 500 are full of dumb people who hired all these Scrum Masters. How'd they get in the position they're in? So if you're going to do that, you should have some kind of real working alternative to the problem instead of just slamming it. That's not intellectually honest. So the last thing I'm going to say about Scrum Masters and this Agile and Lean development, one of the future ones we're going to get at Kanban boards. Now, I'm going to tell you, I think that's been around for 100 years. The WIP is part of all manufacturing. Work in progress, they had WIP limits. That's been around forever. And again, I've been doing project management, lead, for about 15 years, but I'm in my 50s now. And I went to school for mechanical engineering, quickly got into programming as a necessity of the machine I was supposed to be working on. And I don't think I've ever seen anything work as well as Agile and Scrum kind of working together. I don't know of anything that's ever worked this well, this quickly. It's been around for a few years now. 10, 12 years, 15 years. It has been a profound change, and it's made companies a lot of money, made them a lot more efficient. But it's not just the 15 years I've been in project management and management. It's for 25 years now. Like I said, I was a full stack developer. I've been in SQL my whole life. But in that whole time, I've never seen anything this good. And if I'm wrong and you're an expert on all this, please show me how and what the alternative is. Because it's not perfect. There are some serious issues in it, but those can be worked through. Agile and Scrum are big enough now that this is something that you have to watch when you're in business. Is the experts that came up with this really did a great job. But as the thing becomes more ubiquitous and more people are learning it and doing it, the great innovations now come from a much more granular level. But the people that work at these PMI Institute and Scrum Alliance, they want to remain relevant. I get that. That's important for your job, obviously. But a lot of the vast improvements are such a small granular level, it's hard to see them trickle back up. And that, I think, is more than anything what's going on with all these people saying Agile's dead, Scrum's a disaster. Maybe in your company or the companies you're working with, but you may be in very big companies where these changes are slow to happen. So, sorry this one was so long, but I thought it was important because I'd hate to see people abandon this and go back to waterfall. And don't see that happen. If it does, it'll be a mix of the two in most places. But hope this helps. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments there. I'll try to do my best to answer them. Thank you again.